Do y'all see the levels? You think it's about one person? No. 5 generations. You got a whole lot of stuff going on here. And the one thing that y'all forgot in the process is the love.
That was a clip from the OWN series, Iyanla Fix My Life, where author and host Iyanla Vanzant tries to help 5 generations in one family discover how their trauma is connected and what is missing. We are on Facebook and Twitter with our post show, continuing our discussion on racial generational trauma. Which leads me to you, Gary, because I need to hear, Sean has just said he's insisting on joy. Many of you have said that. But here's the bottom line question. Can this generational passing on be interrupted for good? Is that possible?
It can be interrupted. I won't say for good. I don't have the evidence to support for good, but I'm happy with interrupting it for now, because it's within that moment that we begin to really correct the negative. So that, if I'm able to name one of the great challenges in getting healthy is not having the language for what's making you feel unat ease or diseased. And so if I have the language that says, this isn't by my doing, that there are things that have happened to us that I now understand, and I have the power in this moment to decide to take a different road. So I'm going to name this and say that I'm traumatized. I'm not just angry, but I'm hurt. I'm not just angry, I'm disappointed. I'm not just angry, I'm afraid. I'm not just angry, I don't know what to do. And I'm not just angry, I haven't been able to let people in to comfort me. And those are important reframes, because it really, for me, opens up the gateway. There's something else that I would share, and Sean had said this in his last comment. 2020 for me, I started the new year by committing to, I no longer was going to seek external validation for what I already knew to be true.
Wow.
I was stopping it then and there. I was no longer going to wait for white people to validate that racism existed, because what I was waiting for was an apology that was never going to come. And it was like a 2-year-old. If I'm going to fight you to be potty trained, you have the power to withhold, and I don't have the power to make you. What I do know is what I know about what I'm experiencing, and so I don't need you anymore to validate that for me. Sharon Eiffel said at the Eiffel, the second annual Gwen Ifill Forum at Simmons University, that what we had seen with this election in terms of how people voted was validation that said we were not crazy. We knew all along what that was at the belly of the beast. We knew all along what happened when people scaled the parapets of the Capitol. Other folks might not have, but I don't need you to tell me what I saw, and I'm not going to allow you to reinterpret what I know I saw.
Actually, it's interesting. That's been an interesting discussion among journalists, because Black journalists have come forward to say, we are not surprised, and we've been writing about it. So, hey, y'all just didn't want to hear us when we said that this was very real. So that's an interesting take. It's really hard when all the other messages are telling you one thing to make that determination that you're not going to wait for the validation and just, know what it is and react accordingly. So here's
everyday life offers you a possibility for joy.
Right.
Yeah,
Kim.
Callie, can I jump in? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's so important. And thank you for saying that, Gary. That's what I was trying to inarticulately say earlier about what I try to give my students. No longer waiting for the validation of their experience from, as Sean was saying that too, from the white society, from their white peers, from their white students, and being really distraught when that validation doesn't come, because it's not coming. It's not coming. They can't see it. They won't see it. Yet James Baldwin said they do not know and they do not want to know, right? They do not want to know. So that's what I try. I think it's really important to give our young people is exactly what Gary's saying. I'm no longer waiting for that. But going back to your question about can we interrupt this generationally? And anybody who knows me knows I'm not optimistic about anything, but I am optimistic about this because I've seen it in my own family. And I'll give you a very specific incidents or example for all of us. Discipline, how Black parents discipline their children is an example of our trauma. I don't know how about y'all, but I grew up being whooped, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Go out there and get me a stitch, a switch, go
Yeah.
cut me a stitch and whip you, right? And violence, right? And brutally. Now, where does that come from? My mother grew up from Mississippi. That came from the fear that if I can't teach you how to control yourself, if you go out there and act out, they will kill you. Literally, they will lynch you. So this was a act of violence, but out of love and concern. We can stop that. Now that I can stop that. I know that that's how I was raised. I know why my mother did it, and I know I don't have to pass that on to my children, right? So I think this is something I see when I see young parents, reacting, young Black parents reacting to toddlers as if their actions are willful and trying to control them. And we can love those parents into a different kind of loving discipline for their children, because that's all racial trauma. That's external, that we have internalized as a way of protecting our kids, but that actually damages our children. And so I do believe we can interrupt these things. I've seen it, and I know we're doing it.
Well, I was smiling because I recall my sister with my niece and nephew telling my father about time out, and he said, "Time what?" I got your time out. She says, "No, they're going to the corner and they're going to think about what happened and we're going to have a discussion." And he was completely like, "I don't know what this is." And she was like, "You're going to see, it's going to work." It was pretty interesting.
You got great nieces and nephews, so I know it works.
Yeah, it definitely did. But here is a question about those younger generations that have come up. So because the level of trauma that many of us in these little squares experienced was so intense, less than our parents, less than our grandparents for sure, but still quite a bit, it kind of gives you a level of strength to face some stuff because your expectation is that it's going to be there. You don't begin, perhaps this is bad, with an expectation that it won't be there. So you build a kind of muscle, a resilience muscle. So my question to all of you dealing with younger generations and this generational trauma, do they have the muscle without experiencing the level of trauma? Anybody?
I'll jump in and say they do have the muscle, and they've got plenty of trauma. We can say that, and in some ways they have more trauma because of social media, because of the prevalence of seeing Black bodies and Black men being killed. I mean, I knew Black people. I knew when videos, cameras came out, we knew this, but I had never witnessed a cop put his foot on the neck of a human being and, kill him. These young people see it over and over and over again. So in some ways their trauma, it's both less and more than ours, I guess I would say. But this is a concern I do have about expectations about young people. This is a double-edged sword. Sean talked about his parents saying, you can do anything you want. My mother taught me every step is going to be hard, right? Every step is going to be against you. Don't ever go into these places expecting to be loved. I never worked in a majority white institution where I expected to be loved. That was hard, but in some ways protective. And what I see in my young students is that they do come in expecting not only to be treated with respect, but to be loved and welcomed. And so when it doesn't happen, it is wounding for them in a way that it honestly wasn't wounding for me. I don't know what to do about that. I think it gets back to Sean's point about how do we as a society, and what Charles was saying too, how do we institutionalize what Gary did for Charles? I think we used to do that in our churches, right? And in our community groups. And maybe these young people don't have these Black spaces the way we did. So I think we need to rebuild our community or rebuff up. They're still there, but reinvigorate our communities, our churches, and all that stuff.
Okay, what do the rest of you think?
Kelly, I don't want to find out.
Oh, okay.
I really want to be honest with you, right? Because I think, to exercise that muscle is so exhausting, and I think We want to live in a world where our kids don't have to exercise that muscle, that they can be free, and that they will be appreciated for their blackness and for who they are, the content of their character. For me to even think, whether or not my son has that muscle is traumatizing in itself. Should he have to have that muscle? Should he have to worry about how to navigate as a black man? In a perfect world, I would expect him not to, right? I will hope that he didn't have to, right? I will also hope there's certain conversations that we don't need to have and we should not have. I will also hope that I'm not anxious every time he leaves my household, or if if we're in Toys R Us together, he goes down the hallway. I'm like, oh, where's my son? It's like my heart starts to beat fast. I will hope that that muscle is something that he will not have to utilize, and that we don't have to find out whether he has that muscle, because we're in a world where black men, black women, black boys, black girls have to go through extreme exhaustion to utilize a muscle that they should not have in the first place.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, I have such great appreciation for my parents, because I didn't realize they let my brother and I explore the world. And my parents were born 1916 and 1919, and they had children very late. So they grew up in a very different Alabama and Tennessee, Georgia. And yet they dreamed big for their kids. And they also, when we grew up, let us explore. And I now appreciate how frightened they also were, and holding their breath, because they knew what the world could be, but they didn't want to stunt. They gave us information about how to negotiate. So of course I was given the message about when you get stopped, not if, when you get stopped, this is what you do and we'll take care of it, right? So I got that message, but it was never don't explore the world. But I also understand what it means to have someone in your corner who you don't know is watching you, is supporting you, is observing what's happening. And what I think is so important as we think about young people today, life is full of triggers. So, I talk to my students about, saying that you need a trigger warning. Life doesn't come with trigger warnings. Life sneaks up on you really fast and hard. And how then do we begin to respond, and particularly doing clinical work? Your clients don't have trigger warnings. Things happen. They will share things with you for which there is no warning, that are pretty awful in their lives. And how are you going to deal with that? You're going to stop the session and say, whoa, wait, that really distressed me because I don't know how to handle that. I wish you'd warn me you were going to talk about this. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. And so we are in a world that is perpetually triggering us. And I think we need to be able to offer young people alternative ways of negotiating the world around them, so that they both exercise the muscle, but it's not overdeveloped.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Sean,
right?
Yeah. You want to add something?
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to resonated with me in a classroom where, on the one hand, students do seem exposed to a lot of trauma through social media. At the same time, when they get to college, and I teach at Boston College, a very privileged institution where we teach more students from the top 1% than the bottom 60%. And they're oftentimes surprised when they experience racism. And I'm always shocked when they come to my office, because they're expecting this warm welcome, which they get for the first couple of weeks, and then things start to happen. They start to unfold over the semester of the year, and I'm always shocked when they're shocked that these experiences are happening. And there is research though that suggests that in itself is another form of trauma. When you think that you're being treated fairly, and then realize that you're not, like there's actually sociological research which says that in and of itself is extremely traumatizing, because basically, I'm going to, in more layman's terms, you bought into the American dream and then it crumbles around you. And so when it crumbles around you and you don't have anything to catch that crumbling, it's another form of trauma. So you're not only dealing with the trauma of racial trauma, you're dealing with the fact that this dream you had, even though you see social media, but this dream you had is also shattered. And so I do think we have to figure out a way to do what, it's one thing I think my parents did really, really well, especially my mother, was holding simultaneously Black joy and realizing those limitations. And there just has to be a way we can figure out how to do this and hold them both at the same time. And I think we can do that. I think there are mechanisms that we can do that. I think some of the culture clubs we have in colleges, but also I think a lot of our students need to find avenues for, at least in the educational system, outside of college. Like I think you're depending on your college to do too much. Go into other communities outside your college and find what you're looking for. But I do think we need to find ways to say, yes, you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are agentic, you can find joy. And simultaneously, don't be surprised when you're not going to get this big award for whatever institution you're expecting it from. Whether it be the United States, your college, your first job, we have to prepare them for that crumbling because at least I have not seen the empirical evidence yet that it's not going to come. I'm hopeful for it. I meditate every single day. I'm waiting for that time. I have a beautiful niece, so I want the world to be open to her and everything that has. But I also want her to be ready for what happens if it doesn't happen. And you're still going to be okay. You're still going to be joyful. You're still going to be beautiful. You're still going to be the same human being. Yet this crumbling is not going to crumble you.
Well, as folks smarter than me say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So I thank you all for joining me. Thank you so much.